I basically, well, before I start, I moved that skill analysis paper out of module 5. I moved it into module 6. I think I have it due the 28th. It's the one big one. It's the biggest paper you're doing this semester, and I want to make sure take the time you need. If you're late on that or things like that, it's not a problem with me. I just want to make sure you take some time on that paper, because a lot of people report to me that that particular paper is one that they'll refer back to from time to time in their career. In fact, I remind people to hang on to it and refer back to it. 5 years even, you read back on it, you'll be surprised at how you've characterized things. So take some extra time if you need on that. And also, on next week's assignment, I cut it back, made it a little smaller. So hopefully I know we've been working pretty hard through here with a lot of assignments and readings and stuff. Basically what I want to do tonight, I don't plan on being on a long time since we did the group meetings, but I really wanted to highlight, I really do want to highlight some things on teams. I really believe that if you can come at participation in a team and you have some really basic understanding about teams, I think it can really help your future career in terms of survivability in teams. At least if you become kind of a bit of an expert on some of the dynamics and processes that happen on teams. Believe me, it's boded well for me in my life, throughout my life, because I'm constantly involved in groups and teams and everything. And some of these basic principles and ideas I think are important. So I wanted to just highlight some of them for you. Just basically what I really want to talk about is just to highlight some basic thoughts and ideas on teams that I've felt over the years. There is a presentation by Jim Smither on this site on some of the problems in teams and team decision making that's worth reviewing. Team would be so much easier if I could do it all myself. That said, let's move on. You heard me talk about when I ran the group meetings, I talked about the task people, dimension people side of teams. I think that's a good dialectic to always keep in your back of your mind. What's the task? What's happening with the people? When you look at a team, you're looking at what's the organizational context of the team. So a team that you might be on in your organization, it is different than what a team might be like in the other organization. Like a team in the military might be very, very different than a team of creative artists. That context is what we're talking about. What's the culture of your organization, et cetera? And then we don't often pay attention to design of the team. Even before you get into the actual team you're on, the big question is, are the right people on the team? And that's a really, really big mistake that a lot of organizations make. They just throw teams together and don't necessarily ask, are the right people on it? And sometimes a lot of times we say, well, we need someone from this department, that department, or whatever. So I'm not, some of my thoughts are more on the team dynamics, but it's really, really important before you set up a team to really hone in on what kind of people are on the team, who should be there, what kind of knowledge, skills, what kind of information do they bring. A general rule of thumb I have, the more diverse you are, the better your potential is for a lot of creative ideas. And then you're dealing with motivation. That's where you're dealing with the people side of things. And then the strategy has to do with all the task stuff, coordination, communication, etc. Four ways that we've traditionally looked at teams are they productive? Are they cohesive? Have teams been able to learn and grow? And is there a lot of integration of what they do throughout the organization or with the team? Just another concept I'm throwing in. Are any of you aware of the social loafing effect of a team? I like this little slide. Almost naturally, the larger your group gets, the less individual work people put into it. That's what's called the loafing effect. As groups get larger and larger, people's efforts tend to go down, individual effort. And if I'm sure you've been on teams where you experience social loafing, and actually the optimal size of a team is around 5 to 7. So productivity may tend to go down as teams get larger. So one person working alone expends a great deal of effort. They found this out. Just some experience with animals. I think a farmer with 2 oxen. They did this experiment with oxen, and oxen were pulling carts, and they would measure how much one ox effort they put into it. Then when they teamed that ox up with another ox, individual effort went down. And basically that's the same thing happening here. We all have a tendency to say, well, I don't need to work quite as hard. Someone else will pick up some of the slack. So just be aware that this happens on teams. Again, that chart I put up there, the people dimension, it talks about motivation and effort. Task dimension is all the coordination strategies. Knowledge, skill, and ability relates to who basically should be on the team. I'll make these slides available to you. These are some questions to ask about getting the task done, about people on the team, and I classify processes and procedures as either task or people-oriented kinds of things that happen. But like, what are the norms of the group? What are the values in the group? Things like that. Another kind of question to think a little bit about is on a team, what types of work is the team doing? Hold on a minute. Okay, what kind of, can you hold just a quick second? Oops, I wanted to make sure I'm recording this. Sorry about that. So one thing to think about on a team is what kind of a team is it? And the type of team you're on, certain processes and things will happen. So if you're on a tactical team, you're trying to put together a tactic to get things done, you're going to be focused on accuracy. You're going to have you're going to really structure what the team does tightly. And everyone's going to be focused on what they need to do and should do. That's different from a problem-solving team where you're thrown together and you have problems you've got to deal with. And then if you're on a creative team, that is, again, a different kind of setup that starts to happen. So a lot of team meetings we have are more tactical in nature. That's when you really have to have a structured agenda and a structured way you're going to get to it, timelines and everything. The problem solving team sometimes is when you sometimes really get into some people related issues. So it's important to step back and think about when you're on a team, what's really going on there. What kind of a team are we working on? Again, I talked about the task people. Here are some of the different roles people play on teams. And even if there's no one on your team identified doing these things, you can have influence by you just stepping up and doing them. Actually, one of the people who can exert great influence on the team is the person that says, "Hey, I'll take the minutes of the meeting," and believe it or not, they have a lot of influence over ideas and structure. And this is what I had asked you to look at when you were working on your team. These dynamics happen on every team, whether you're conscious of them or not. Another concept I think about is group potency. We believe that we as a group can be effective. Just that belief, the belief that we're a good group, can lead to process gain. Just our individual belief in the power of the team can lead to collective efficacy. Groups that believe in themselves are more successful, and group potency may be more of a predictor of group performance than actual ability. In other words, group potency is the belief that we have. I think you might see that in sports. You'll see this talked about on sports teams. Here's a team that won the Super Bowl, but they weren't the most talented team on the field. You see that, you see people talk about that, that it's not necessarily the most talented. So don't underestimate sometimes the importance of belief and what happens on a team. And part of that is group moods and emotions impact things on teams. Emotions, as I had talked about earlier, are very contagious. They're like viruses. They can be good or bad. My emotions can be caused by yours. One of the big things a leader really does influence group emotions. So in thinking about teams a little bit, think about mood and emotions, because that is an important element. One of the things the book talks about are stages of team development. And I think it's important to understand this. Every single team that you're involved in, and what I mean by that, a team that's an ongoing team, goes through these stages or gets arrested at them. And let me just bring up another slide. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Teams, it's almost like our development as a human being. We're an infant, a child, a preteen, a teen, an adult, or whatever. You can't become an adult without going through those stages. In many ways, that's the same way with teams. It's real important to understand this, because teams are in stages and are at various states of the stage. In the forming stage, I took a lot of these from the book, but if you're in a new group that's forming, these things, the questions, these are typical of any group. Who are these other people? What's expected of me? Who's going to lead? What's supposed to happen? And then what I put on there, what are the people issues involved and what are the task issues involved? So people tend to be silent, maybe self-conscious, laid back. That they don't want to offend anybody. So one of your tasks is to orienting people, talk about why they're there, etc. As groups move along, they begin to norm. And what norms are different ways the group chooses to interact with itself. So different groups have different underlying norms that are in play, and all groups have them. Uh, what's the role of humor in our group? Um, what are the values? What about speaking up? Just how do we operate? What's the culture like? Are we cooperative? Are we a group that goes at each other? Um, how do we deal with disagreement? Is conflict welcomed? So, in norming, we want to fit in. We want to feel like we're a part. So, norms grow up because this is the norms of our group society. And so to fit into our group, you've got to go along with our norms. So a group goes through a stage of setting up various norms. Sometimes in a group, I sometimes recommend going through a process of talking about what are the rules we're going to operate by. Come up with team rules, RULES, like a team contract. Teams then go through a stage of what's called storming. And that's when, as we get to know each other more, and we get to know each other's quirks, we start disagreeing. We don't all think the same. We're not all alike. How do we handle dissension, disagreement? If I disagree with you, how do I convey that? How do I do all this and still be a member of the team? Do people start to get cliquish with each other? Or what about competition? How do we challenge each other? So managing conflict becomes a big issue on a team. Not hiding away from conflict, but managing conflict. Sometimes group norms grow up. There's a group problem called groupthink. Have you ever heard of the expression groupthink? Anyone want to venture a guess at what groupthink is? Anyone?
Is it when everyone thinks the same in the group? Everyone conforms to the same idea?
Pretty much. Uh, even if some people disagree, they still might conform. A groupthink is it becomes more important to preserve the harmony of the team than to come up with the right answer. A lot of times, the Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba under the Kennedy administration, many considered a victim of groupthink. The Challenger disaster, the space shuttle that blew up with the teacher on it, an analysis of that, they talked about groupthink as being the major issue there. Any boss runs into this. If you have people around, people don't bring their opinions up. People tend not to disagree. Everyone kind of goes along and shakes their head. That's what groupthink is, and it's very dangerous in organizations. So storming is a pretty important part because how do you allow disagreement to occur? I'll get an interesting story on this. I think the book talks about this. A study of groups there, with executives in the group. There was a series of teams set up with executives. They had to come up with group decision, and on half of the teams, they put what was called a devil's advocate. And the devil's advocate was the person who was there consciously to disagree, was the person who was always challenging what other people were thinking, were disagreeing. And when the exercise was done, every single team with a devil's advocate had a higher quality of decision than the teams without. That shows that disagreement and conflict, good conflict, led to better decisions. Now, part two of that experiment was each team was then told they had to get rid of one person on the team. Every team with a devil's advocate got rid of the devil's advocate. In other words, they didn't know the devil's advocate had been placed on the team. In other words, healthy conflict leads to much, much better decision making. However, we as humans don't tend to like conflict, even if it's healthy conflict. So I think it's pretty important to realize and understand that. Sometimes we have to build conflict into situations. And some astute CEOs wouldn't allow decision making to occur until they even went to the point of having people take other sides and other positions. And then the final stage of a team that's really functioning well is called the performing stage. This is where a team is really operating at the highest level. Teams have high mutual trust. There's unconditional commitment to the team. There's a lot of innovation going on. There's a lot of conflict that happens, etc. There's a book I'm going to recommend. Oh, here it is. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Really an easy read. If we were in class, I would have you do a group activity called the Mushroom Challenge. Any of you ever hear of the Mushroom Challenge? And if you had to look it up, it's a group task I would have had you do where I would have broken you into groups of probably 4, and I would have given you strands of spaghetti, some string, tape, and a marshmallow, and tried to see which group could build the tallest structure. This is an experiment. If you look it up on Google called the Mushroom Challenge, you'll see it written about. Anyway, and it was an architect and engineer who came up with this exercise, and they've run it. And consistently, when they've done this exercise over time, the group that tends to come up the best in doing the task are kindergarten children in this group task. Kindergarten children have beat CEOs and executives and MBA students. And this guy, Daniel Coyle, what he tried to do in writing this book was he tried to figure out why were kindergarten kids so successful as a team. And that's what this is about. And what he did in this book is he looked at some of the best performing teams around the world he could find, and he interviewed about them. One of them was like SEAL Team 6. So those are the types of teams that he looked at, and it really is a quick and very good read. So I offer that idea to you on this stages of team development. Again, this is something that if you're aware of when you're on a team, take that chart. It's in. I put that chart in your in the module for you. Take that chart with you. Take a look at any team you're on, and take a look at the questions and things that are happening, and see if you can see what kind of a stage you might be at on your teams. This book I just held up there, Culture Code. There are 3 major things he discovered on these high performing teams. One, they built safety. In other words, building safety, there's a concept out there called psychological safety. And some people think that is maybe one of the single most important elements of people, of high functioning teams. Every member of the team feels psychologically safe. In other words, I feel connected. I feel like I can speak up. People will listen to me. So there's a sense that people feel safe in the team. They feel psychologically safe. And then people also have a sense that they're sharing the risk with other people. There's kind of a shared vulnerability. And what that means is everyone on the team is mutually accountable to each other. I'm willing to share with you what my weaknesses are. And you can talk about that freely, strengths and weaknesses. And it's the blending of those that helps the team be high performing. And then these teams have a real honed in, focused sense of purpose. What are the shared goals, values? So this book talks about these 3 elements that he uncovered in his view of teams. The other book I'd mentioned to you in the first class, this one called No Hard Feelings. And you remember I mentioned that? That book has a chapter on teams. And the authors in this book, main area of focus is on the concept of psychological safety. It's the single biggest thing. So just some things to think about on teams. How do you get that sense of being psychologically safe, or that feeling that you're safe on this team? Another great book out there, Patrick Lencioni. You may have seen it in the popular press. If you have to go on an airline trip one of these days, maybe you can pick it up at an airport and read it on the trip. It's called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And a lot of what I'm talking to you about, there's a lot of the same things being talked about. They talk about the 5 dysfunctions, the absence of trust. There again, there's that sense of psychological safety, the fear of conflict. I've talked about that. A lack of accountability, avoidance, a lack of commitment, and avoidance of accountability. Highly performing teams feel accountable to each other. If people aren't performing, they call them out on it. And then focus on results. That there again, you hear me talking about the same things over and over. And winning teams then sorry about that. Winning teams trust each other, engage in unfiltered conflict around ideas, not people. They commit to decisions and plans of action. They hold one another accountable, and they focus on achievement of collective results. So this book, I told you about No Hard Feelings. Here are some of the ideas from the book. Some of the signs of groups that aren't safe is don't make people feel stupid for asking questions. The warning eye rolls are corrosive. Stop talking over other people. These are all signs of psychological safety. Here's a cartoon that gets at it. The absence of psychological safety. Should I say something? Do I sound stupid? Does my idea even make sense? So you don't say anything. And if someone says, great meeting, see you next week, you give question mark over your head. Those cartoons are from this book, No Hard Feelings. And here's a little one I'll throw in at the end. I'm not sure whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. We could spend this whole class on introverts and extroverts and on the dynamics, but here's what an extrovert looks like the longer they're in a meeting, and what happens if you're an introvert the longer you're in a meeting. I think that's a pretty funny little chart. Then in the course modules for this week, on time, if you go to the groups and teams module, I've put in here some handouts and PowerPoints. Can you wait a second? Sorry about that. My wife's trying to get into a Zoom meeting. I put on here some handouts that I really would recommend to you. I think these handouts are ones that I've gathered over the years that I found quite helpful. I did ask you on the assignment to look at the process check and process observation. What I've put in here are a big 6-page handout on problems on teams, 10 problems and some interventions you can do. I would really recommend, I've put in here brainstorming and nominal group technique. These are techniques I've used all the time to get at some group decision making, some group problem solving. I've used this one a ton of times, multi-voting. I would say these handouts I've put in here are ones that over the years have really helped me in a really practical way on teams. And then over on the other side, I put some PowerPoints on some of these issues. So someone had asked me about getting some a handout on different books that I've liked, so I'm working on that. But the three I've mentioned tonight. One is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. This book, Culture Code. If you're in, I would really recommend that. And then this one, that No Hard Feelings. This is about emotions at work. Abbreviated meeting tonight, but that's all I have. I really just wanted to highlight some things on teams that I think are pretty important. So I'll make these, I'm not sure if these slides are in the module, so I'll make them available to you. All right, any questions? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a question about groupthink.
Yeah.
So avoiding it, how do you know, like, how do you avoid it if you're not sure if you think you're making the right call? I mean, obviously the example you used with NASA, they learned that they used the wrong call when the spaceship blew up. But I mean, I've been in groups for 5 years now, and we've made calls and that we thought we were right, and they ended up working out. So how do you kind of avoid groupthink?
I think the big thing is looking for, okay, sometimes groups actually assign people in a group your job in the group is to come up with a reason why we shouldn't make this decision. So you actually tell people, you actually have some people in the group actually go out and do that. So you actively try and get people to disagree with what the prevailing thinking is. And some groups actually assign a devil's advocate, consciously do that. I think a couple of those slides have some ideas on avoiding groupthink. One set of slides, and I think Jim's presentation talks a little bit about that. But the big thing is making sure ideas that go against the prevailing thought get heard and considered. And part of it, only you could answer that. Is there a climate on your team where people can disagree or voice opinions that are different? That would be a little bit of what I would talk about. Another one is, are opinions treated as facts? Are there differing alternative ideas coming up at times? Or does it seem like, the boss or somebody comes in and said, here's the problem, here's my idea, what all do you think? And everyone shakes their head and says, oh yeah, that's good. Sometimes those kind of things happen a lot in groups.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've had good managers who will bring up alternative options just to discuss them. So this makes sense.
But a big part of it is, do people feel like they can disagree or bring up differing ideas and things like that?
Mm-hmm.
It is a part of it. Like, within the Bay of Pigs, another one was the development of the Corvair, General Motors. This is before your time. The Corvair was a bomb of a car. And it was like all this think tank at General Motors put this together, and you say, how could they have done that? Some people think the decision to go into Iraq was a product of groupthink. It's kind of everyone in a small group listening to each other. And it's how much of outside opinion are you letting in? So. Groupthink to me is a very interesting subject. I'd look it up. There's a lot of interesting stuff on it. What it is it's a group becoming too cohesive. The group is so cohesive that the harmony in the group is what's important. This veneer of that we all agree and that we're highly cohesive. And cohesiveness is interpreted that we all agree on everything. That's not necessarily what it means. All right, anything else? All right, I will, I'll see you next week. I'm working my way through the SSS software papers. So they're all good, pretty good. All right. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great week.
Thank you.